Good evening. Excited to learn with you the Sefer tonight. And I encourage folks who are listening live to feel free to send some questions, share some comments. My colleague here will pass some notes to me if you have any questions or thoughts. And we've been jumping around. We've been recording a number of the mitzvot in the Taryag mitzvot, the 613 biblical mitzvot, and been looking at the Sefer Chinuch based on the Rambam's Taryag, based on his 613. And so we're jumping around in number sometimes, and tonight we're going to look at number 63. Number 63. The prohibition against oppressing the ger. Oppressing the ger. And it says here in the Chinuch, Asur lanu lavazoto afilu b'devarim. It's forbidden to oppress the ger, even in words. Meaning, there's objective acts that oppress. Financial, physical. Then there's also these objective words that oppress. And then, of course, there's a subjective element, meaning an element of oppression is not merely an objective list, but it's what makes one feel oppressed, what makes a group of people feel oppressed. And they learn this from the direct Torah command, V'ger lo toneh, right? Exodus 22:20 and Shmot 22:20, and a ger you shall not oppress. One of the 613, as important as Shabbat and Kashrut and all of Rosh Hashanah and Pesach and everything else, don't oppress the ger. Now the ger can be understood two ways. The ger, in a Talmudic sense, we understand primarily as a convert to Judaism. And of course this is very important. That one who enters Jewish life from the outside can feel alone and alienated and not protected. And it can be easy to marginalize or alienate them or go even further. But also many of the Mafarshim, many of the commentators understand that the ger is a Gentile living within a Jewish community. Right? And even further, some understand a ger to be any vulnerable individual who doesn't have full protections. In fact, if you look at Rashi in Shmot 22:20, right here, he notes that the ger is not just speaking of a convert, but anyone stranger new to the land. We're dealing with immigrants. We're dealing with refugees. We're not even talking about how they got there. Did they get there legally? What's their nationality or religion? They're there. In my midst, someone is here who's a stranger. Stranger. I don't care if they converted. I don't care if they're an immigrant. I don't care if they're a refugee. V'ger lo toneh. V'ger lo toneh. You may not oppress them, the Torah says, over and over. You may not oppress them. Of course, we continue to learn, stand up for their justice. It's not just a prohibition, but enable their justice. Make sure you love them. Even further, commanding an emotion. Right? Of course, emotions in Jewish law are typically understood as an action. The maseh, love doesn't mean feel love, but do acts of, do these acts of love. And we see again over in Vayikra 1933 and Leviticus 1933, lo tenenu, right? Same idea, v'ger lo toneh. We see the exact same idea over there, not to oppress them. And she'inyan ha'ona'ah elav krova yoter mib Yisrael, ki ha'Yisrael yesh lo golim shetovin el bono. Because this type of oppression that we're dealing with is even more likely, even more possible than with a fellow Jew. Because the fellow Jew has, or your fellow citizen, has their defenders. They have friends, they have family, they have their neighbors, they have society, they have power and privilege. They have systems of law that protect them. And these people would back them up if they were to be disgraced. But this person stands alone. They stand alone in the world. They stand alone in society without these protections. In fact, the Akedas Yitzchak, Rav Yitzchak of Rama, 15th century Spain, explains that when we went down to Mitzrayim, when we went down to Egypt, we ultimately became slaves. So what he's trying to teach over there is it's not just if at this moment you have insecurity based upon a lack of social network and social capital and legal protections, but the knowledge that at any point it could turn. A new president could be elected, a new politician elected, a new sheriff in town says, I'm enforcing the rules differently. I'm changing the laws. The fact that even if at this moment you feel safe, because you don't have the same social standing and legal protections, there's an anxiety, an existential anxiety for yourself and for your family, for the future of your life. Important to see the Ramban here as well, about how he understands what it means to be defenseless as the stranger. And of course, the whole fact that this is rooted continuously in the text, because we were Gerim b'Mitzrayim, because we ourselves, as Klal Yisrael, we ourselves were immigrants. We ourselves were the strangers wandering. That of course itself demonstrates that we're not dealing simply with as narrow of a category as converts, as important as that is. And converts do unfortunately experience abuse and mistreatment. But we're not, that this is much broader, because of course Jews weren't converting to be Egyptian, to those religions. Rather, we were a marginalized population within Egyptian society, which is exactly what the text seems to be dealing with over and over. So it says in the Sefer, in the Midrash, Shelo Tomar Lo, Emesh Hayita over Avodah Zara, V'atshav Nichnasta, Tachat Kanfei Shechina. It says in the Sefer that you can't say to these people, yesterday you were like an idolater, and now today you're under the Shekhinah, the wings of the divine presence. Because when we talk about oppression, we're not only dealing with systemic oppression, financial, physical, but we're also dealing with words, onat devarim, right? How words can strike fear and push down. And so it is forbidden in Jewish law to remind the convert that they converted. Privately, publicly, to say, look where you came from. You're not real. You're not a real Jew, actually. You're from the outside. Or so too. You're from some junky country, to put down other countries where people come from. Right? That you're just from this place. You're not the real deal. You know, your family's only been here from Poland for 30 years. You just got here from Afghanistan 5 years ago. Oh, you're really Mexican, right? You're not a real American, right? To actually tell someone of where they came from in this kind of way is the prohibition in the Torah, the Sefer says. Goes on. Ha'ishu b'neinu bli ozer v'somech yesh koach b'yad kol echad ve'echad memenu im ohavav alav leval navir alav and to derech klal afilu b'devarim ke'ilu hu ke'echad memenu umitoch gedarim ke'ela niknet nefesh yakara umsulselet umuteret hamidot haruya lekabbalat hatov. So first, the Chinuch says that the person who is among us, with no one else to help protect them or uphold them, they're in the hands of every one of us. Every one of us has the power to oppress them, to do evil to them, because they don't have these legal protections. That anyone can do as they please to hurt this individual, even with words, in a way that strikes fear. I'm going to hire undocumented workers for my work business because I know they have no protections. I know I can do as I please to them, right? Because no one can stand for them. And in fact, if they try to report that I'm not paying them properly, I can just turn them into the authorities themselves. And then the Chinuch goes on to say something very interesting. That this is not merely a consequentialist ethics. It's not merely deontological ethics. It's not even just rules, right? Even rules based on values. But this is also a virtue ethic. Nefesh yakara umsoselet umuteret hamidot haruya lekabbalat hatov. That actually, the way we treat the most vulnerable in our communities, in our societies, will determine our own moral refinement. Our character is determined not by how we treat the most powerful, but by how we treat the most vulnerable. By how we treat those who we believe have ultimately no power or any way to reciprocate for something we do with them. In fact, the Rabbeinu Bechaya says that this itself is about emulating Hashem. Halachta bedracha ve'imitatio dei. That the way that we treat those without this power and social standing is an opportunity to emulate the ways of God. Because as we learned from Tehillim already, from Psalms, that we ourselves are all human beings in a sense, because we don't live on this world forever. We're here temporarily, and we are all strangers, existential strangers in human existence before our souls ultimately return. I see we have a little question here. Is it ignorance that causes Jews to not obey this commandment? Question from my friend. Are they just overtly refusing to obey because of hatred or because of fear? Okay, good. So let's hold on to this question, and we'll come back to this very important question as to why we're not obeying this command. And I'll say one thing from the start, which is that part of it is that everyone is cherry picking within the text on all sides. But the fact is, even the most frum among us are cherry picking. That all of a sudden we have stringency upon stringency for kosher laws and Shabbat laws. But why aren't we stringent in how we treat the immigrant? Right? We want to be God-fearing Jews, we're God-loving Jews. We should be machmir. We should be so stringent that every day we're just like we're checking our broccoli for bugs or tearing our toilet paper or whatever we're doing for Shabbos, that we're also going out every day to find the most marginalized in society and to help to lift them up. That's what it means to be a religious person. Not only to be Yotzei the Mitzvah, to fulfill the Torah, right? But actually to emulate the ways of the all-compassionate one and the all-just one. We are to do this. And so part of this is an old world mentality, that we ourselves are not safe. We ourselves are a traumatized people, and so we must be isolationist and only take care of ourselves. Only stand up for ourselves. Because everyone else is out to get us, right? If we don't help ourselves, no one else will. It's all zero-sum game, right? And so part of this is tragically still a fear-based mentality, that we need not stand up for anyone else, no one else will stand up for us, right? And that we are elevated and the elite. And a part of this, in fact, is another layer of ignorance, of a lack of encounter. If you've only seen the merciful and compassionate, soft side of your fellow Jew, of your fellow family member, of your neighbor, you may not see that Tselem Elokim, the human dignity within another who looks different from you and comes from a different country from you, right? So in fact, when you're in an isolated place and you don't go to school with them and you don't break bread with them, right? Because many treat kashrut laws primarily as a vehicle to separate from Gentiles, that in fact you can dehumanize them. In fact, you could argue Moshe Rabbeinu, when he looks this way and that way and he sees no person, and thus he intervenes. In fact, there were slaves everywhere, but he dehumanized them. He looked both ways and he saw no person and he couldn't see the humanity in them. One can look at an immigrant or a refugee or a convert and see their face and yet not see anybody there at all. The invisible people from society that aren't even seen. And so this is so important that the Chinuch notes that it's this care for the ger is mentioned 24 times in the Torah. Now, you don't see Shabbat mentioned 24 times. Not to put down Shabbat, I love Shabbat. 24 times, and actually he brings from Bava Metzia 59b, the Talmud, which actually argues how many times, based on various editions, essentially, this emerges. Is it 24 times? Is it 36? Is it even 46 times that this emerges? The care for the ger. And again, it goes also to love, and the love is juxtaposed to a love of God. V'yahavta et Hashem, v'yahavtam et ger. Right? The same formulation that we should love God and we should love the ger, because in the end of the day, they become synonymous. That ultimately, God is not interested in a love where we love the divine, but we can't love the vulnerable on the planet. In fact, the Baal Shem Tov has a beautiful Torah that before we daven, we have to look around the room. We have to look around the room. Before we declare love for God, look around the room and feel love for everyone around us. And I would go even further. We have to look and feel love for those who aren't around us. for those who are marginalized that they can't even be in the room. They don't even have the power and privilege to be present. And so this is a place to pause, which, by the way, the Mechil to the Rabbi Shmuly on Mishpatim mentions that, in a sense, we're almost mocking ourselves when we oppress the ger, because it's our essence. We were gerim b'Mitzrayim. I mean, how many times can we say it in the daily liturgy and in Pesach every year, that we ourselves were this, and that when we oppress a ger, it's as if we're oppressing ourselves. We're mocking ourselves when we forget our history of where we've come from, persecution and oppression, from pogroms and crusades and the Holocaust, to then go the other way and say, oh, we have sovereignty? Kick out the asylum seekers, right? Or now we have power as American Jews, right? Refugees have no place here, as if we weren't begging to get in just decades ago. So in fact, this is not some kind of political propaganda. This is exactly what the Torah says. Don't oppress the stranger because you are strangers. And this is essential to Torah. If we neglect this, we neglect this at our own peril. Let's keep learning together, and I look forward to doing our holy work together to uphold the mitzvah, the prohibition and the positive affirmation to protect the ger in our midst.